Dwellers, and welcome back to another Fallout Cookbook cooking video. Today we're going to be making the baked Bloatfly loaf, which is actually a vegetarian meatloaf. To get started, we are actually going to first start off by making a barbecue sauce for it. And for that we are going to need half of a cup of Nuka Cola syrup, and I will leave a link down in the description to how I made this. And I'm going to go ahead and add that into my pot. Go ahead and turn my heat on. We also need, to this, I'm also going to add a half a cup of ketchup and a fourth of a cup of steak sauce. As well as a fourth of a cup of Worcestershire sauce. I'll go ahead and start stirring that in. I'm also going to add in 1 tablespoon of hot sauce, and that can be a hot sauce of your choosing. I'm just using a basic Louisiana hot sauce for this. We're also going to need 1 teaspoon of onion powder and 1 teaspoon of garlic powder. And that's all that's going into our barbecue sauce. I'm just going to stir this together, and once it comes to a boil, I will reduce it down to a simmer and let it simmer for about 20 minutes. You want to make sure you get all the clumps out when you stir it in. So in my other pot, I've already started heating up 2 tablespoons of olive oil, to which I'm going to add 2 shiitake mushrooms that I removed the stems from and chopped up. I have 1 portabella mushroom that I've chopped, and I have 3 button mushrooms that I have chopped up. And those are going to go straight into our pan, along with 1 orange bell pepper and a medium onion that I have chopped. And those are going to saute down until the onions start to turn translucent, about 10 minutes. So while our sauce is simmering and our vegetables are sauteing, I'm going to process 3/4 cups of cashews and a half of a cup of walnuts in my food processor, just until they're small crumbly pieces. Just be careful not to go too far and turn it into a nut butter. So this is what I want my nuts to look like, just small crumbly bits. No big chunks in there, and it doesn't look like a nut butter. The next thing I'm going to do is process a 15-ounce can of chickpeas that I have drained and rinsed. And I'm going to process these until they are smooth. And this is what our chickpeas look like now that I've processed them down. Still kind of crumbly, but there's no large pieces in it. Now if I had kept the liquid in, it would have turned into a paste like you were going to make hummus. So, but this application, we want them just like this. At this point, it's been about 10 minutes. Our onions are translucent and the peppers have softened and the mushrooms are all cooked down. I'm now going to add in 4 teaspoons of dried basil, 1/4 of a bunch of parsley that I've chopped down. Now the recipe does call for 1/4 of a bunch of cilantro. Unfortunately, I'm one of those people that when I try cilantro, it tastes like soap. So I have substituted parsley for here. But if you do like cilantro, I would go with the cilantro. I've also got 3 tablespoons of chopped fresh sage and 3 tablespoons of chopped fresh tarragon. And I'm going to add all this straight into our mushroom and onions and peppers. So at this point, I'm just going to let this cook for about another 5 minutes, since I've added the fresh herbs as well as the dried basil. And let me remind you of the community-driven playlists that Japika Death and I have going on our channels. If you would like to be a part of that, it's quite simple. All you need to do is go out, make a cooking video, post it to your channel, and once you have, let either Japik or I know down in the comment section of our newest cooking videos, or if you are a part of his Discord server, you can let us know over there as well. Alright guys, it's been about 5 minutes. I'm just going to set this over to the side to let any extra juices from the mushrooms kind of let loose so that I can drain all the extra moisture off of these. And they also need to cool down a little bit before we handle them. Alright guys, our mushrooms are cooled down and I've drained any extra liquid off of them, but to be honest, there really wasn't hardly any at all. In this bowl, I have a half of a cup of pre-cooked quinoa, and what I did is I just bought a package of already cooked quinoa that I found at the grocery store, and it's the only thing it's seasoned with is a little bit of sea salt. So, you know, if you have the dried at home and want to cook it, go right ahead. I'm sure it'll work just fine. But for me, it was more convenient to buy the pre-cooked. I've also got a half of a cup of dried panko breadcrumbs. These are our cashews and walnuts that I processed in the food processor. And this is the chickpeas that I processed in the food processor. So at this point, all we're going to do is start stirring these together. And then I will add in the mushrooms here in a second. Alright, at this point, I'm just going to add in all of the mushrooms along with all of the seasoning that we added into it. And I'm going to stir this in as well. Now that I have everything stirred together, I'm going to add in 2.5 tablespoons of ketchup. As well as 2 tablespoons of steak sauce. And I also have 1 teaspoon of liquid smoke in here as well. And then I'm just going to salt and pepper this. I don't want to add too much salt because the quinoa already had salt on it, and plus the nuts did as well. So you just salt it to your taste level. And then let me get all this stirred in and we'll get it transferred to our loaf pan. Alright guys, I have a standard size loaf pan that I have just simply lined with a little bit of parchment paper, and that will just make it easier for us to lift the loaf out of the pan after it's done cooking. So at this point, I'm going to start putting this in there. Alright, now that it's all in, I want to press it down tightly into the pan and spread it out evenly. In the recipe, or in the directions, it says to compress it down as tightly as you can. Alright, there we go. And the only thing we have left to do now is to add 1/3 cup of the barbecue sauce that we made to the top of this. And then I'm just going to spread it out evenly across the top. This is going to go into a 375-degree oven for an hour. I'm then going to take it out and let it rest about 10 minutes before I bring you back to show you the next step. This barbecue sauce, though, smells amazing, and it tastes really good. Has just a very nice subtle kick to it from the hot sauces that I added to it. Alright, I'm going to put this on a baking sheet and stick it in my oven for an hour, and I will see you guys when it's ready. I let this bake for an hour, and then I let it sit out on my counter for 10 minutes to start cooling down. And now I'm going to try and gently lift it out and transfer it to the cutting board here. There we go. Let me get my pan out of the way. And now what we need to do is slice it and transfer the slices to a parchment-lined cooking sheet and put it back in the oven for an additional 15 minutes or until the edges start to crisp up. Now it says to cut this in about 1-inch slices and to do it gently, because it will crumble. Oh, there we go. I'm just going to gently start transferring these over. Alright guys, there we go. I've sliced it all up. And I'm going to put this back in the oven on 375 for another 15 minutes. And I will see you guys then. Alright guys, our vegetarian meatloaf is done. I let it set for about 10 minutes on the counter after I pulled it from the oven, just to let it cool down a little bit. Today I'm serving it with garlic and goat cheese mashed potatoes that I added some chives into, as well as some carrots that I just gently blanched and then sauteed in butter. And also a nice cold refreshing glass of Nuka Cola. So let's get in here and give it a little try and see what it tastes like. Now I did put a little bit more of the extra barbecue sauce across the top of it, just because I thought it kind of needed it a little bit. It's actually not too bad. It's got a little bit of a meatiness to it from the mushrooms, but you can definitely get the quinoa and the nuts that were added into it as well. It's very well balanced with all the herbs that we added into it. There's none of them that are that overpower any of the other ones in there. The barbecue sauce is a perfect accompaniment to it. Just that subtle little heat that it gives it really brings some zing to this dish. As to whether I would make this again, I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence about that. If I was a vegetarian, I would say yes, I definitely would make this again. It did turn out really well. It holds together, although it is fragile when you are first cutting it and transferring it to a baking sheet to continue to bake. So yeah, definitely. I hope you guys give this a try. If you do, let me know how it turns out for you down in the comments section below. Remember to check out the Gamers and Geeks playlist, as well as the Fallout Cookbook playlist. I will leave links down in the description to both of them, as well as the recipe for the Nuka Cola syrup. But for now, thank you for joining me. I've been Vault Girl. I hope you guys have enjoyed, and I hope I see you in the next one.